Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness in sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or parent, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who have put in the work as either an athlete, coach, or a parent. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstead. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast. I'm Hans Schulstead, your host, and today we are excited to be joined by a longtime friend, Brian Thul. And in the spirit of my puns, there have been several times where I've thought he's a real tool, but a tool for good. Brian and I are kindred spirits. He totally gets mental fitness. We met originally back, was it 8 years ago, 9? When I was applying to be the hockey development coordinator. I had kind of been pushed by my neighbors to do it. Wasn't sure I would get it. And then Brian was on part of the hiring committee and they decided to have me be the hockey development coordinator. From there on, the rest is history. So we've worked together side by side, as hockey development coordinator, boys travel director, D3 rep, and then later president. So I'm thrilled to have him on here because of that experience, but I also am thrilled to have him on here because Thul has been a referee at all levels of hockey, including the Big Ten and the old men's WCHA. Little did I know, back when I was a young man, I probably booed you at least once.
You're not unique.
Yeah. And I know for sure my dad did, because my dad always thought the referees were out to get the Gophers. But now we're reunited and my son laughs and gives me a hard time about how I always say, oh, that girl must be blind. That's why she's hanging out with you. And I maybe over the years have made a few jokes about that with you. But all in the spirit of love, Brian, all in the spirit of love. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about your background. I assume you played. Where'd you play growing up?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I grew up in Hutchinson, Minnesota, which is about 60 miles straight west of the Twin Cities. It's a factory town and a football town. So I spent my youth playing youth hockey and football, soccer, golf, multi-sport athlete until later in life, but played through high school in Hutchinson. And then I played 1 year at Bemidji State University under Coach Bob Peters, who's I would define as a coaching legend. So that was a great experience. And then I wasn't probably quite emotionally ready to have that journey of being a student athlete, but this is a full-time job. And I continued on my hockey passion with refereeing.
What year did you play at Bemidji?
It was the 92-93 season. They actually won a national championship that year.
You know, we've often talked about my aunt and uncle who are big BSU boosters. Was my aunt passing out the scoring fudge back then?
Probably. I didn't score many goals that year, Hans.
Well, you didn't get it. It was to generate goals.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I think we did. So you played youth football, right? What year did you graduate from high school?
92.
So did you play youth football over in Hutchinson?
Yes.
Yep. Do you remember playing a Buffalo Lake team?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We must have played against each other. What team were you on?
They're the Hutchinson Raiders, which was the police department coach team.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure we played against each other then because we're you're only a year younger than me.
Yeah.
You'll laugh. I played nose guard.
That makes sense, bro.
and then I was also on the offensive line. And actually, Buffalo Lake, for those of you who don't know, is a super small town, not far from Hutch. And I played offensive line, and everybody had to play both ways because we only had 3 subs, I think, both years. And we had a Phi Ed teacher who lived in Hutch who organized the whole thing, which was just a great, great thing. So you became a ref to carry your hockey passion on. Tell me a little bit about that journey of becoming a referee and then ending up, I assume, doing Final Five and Big Ten championship games. How'd you get there?
Like so much of community-based hockey, there's these local heroes, I call them, that just give to the community. And so back in Hutchinson, his name was Ken Harder. He was a local parent and official, and he recruited the boys who were playing hockey at that time, because there wasn't a lot of girls refereeing, but the local players to referee. And he mentored and worked with us. And so that's the journey. Started at 15, and I kept officiating through that, my high school career, and then through college. And when college was done, I had to make a decision. Do I want to continue what had become a true love, refereeing, or do I want to go and get a real job as a teacher? And I kind of said, well, you only have one chance to do a few things in your life. So I decided to go move to Montana and pursue my dream of making it to the National Hockey League as a referee.
Did you ref in ECHL or AHL?
Yeah, so 2 years in junior hockey, one in the American West League, which was in Montana and North Dakota, and then 1 year in the USHL, which is a Midwest League, Iowa, Nebraska. Yeah. And then I moved to the East Coast Hockey League, which at that point, the full-time referees were kind of stationed in the South. So my first apartment that I lived in was in Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh, wow. The hockey hotbed of Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah. The Jackson Bandits.
I bet that was some interesting refereeing, interesting crowds.
Yeah, a lot of stories to be told, but the one that I think of my rookie year was as over in Louisiana Ice Skaters. They were playing Mobile, Alabama, and there was a black athlete from Mobile, Alabama named Roger Maxwell, and he got a penalty, and one of the Louisiana fans decided they were going to wave a Confederate flag behind him.
Oh,
and that didn't go so well, and so it was kind of like, welcome to the South, and kind of the cultural differences that I was never probably exposed to growing up in Minnesota. Not that it didn't exist, but yeah, it was pretty interesting moving to the South and seeing a different part of the country.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee?
No.
A Yankee is someone from the North. A damn Yankee is someone from the North that won't go back home to the North.
Okay.
I was told that.
So we've talked about how you refed in the Big Ten and the WCHA. What was it like reffing big games in a packed arena like the XL or Mariucci?
Just like a player, coach, whatever, preparation is key. That came after thousands and thousands of youth games. So it's easy to say, yeah, I just want to do these games, but I can't forget there was a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of learning. But actually, the higher level you go in officiating, the easier the game becomes to officiate. The pressure just changes and the magnitude of your calls. For me, it was about, and I think all officials who want to work higher levels, how do you build the capacity to focus intensely for 2.5 hours where you have to be 100% dialed in and then managing your emotions and stuff like that. But that process didn't just happen. It's built over many bad calls, many learning opportunities, if you will, no different than a player.
Oh, wait. So referees are human?
Last time I checked, yeah.
Did you ever ref in the MIAC?
No.
So how did you handle getting booed? I'm sure, actually, I'm probably witnessed it. I bet there are certain coaches, and you know who I'm talking about, that might have lost their cool with you, maybe even giving you the finger. How'd you handle that when they're personally attacking your competence and stuff?
As a referee, and I think playing is very similar, but as a referee, when things get elevated, you have to learn how to get calmer. And so, when big calls are missed or perceived missed, when coaches are angry, training yourself to slow down, stay calm, stay collected, be intentional. A lot of internal breathing, probably some self-talk in the brain, like talking yourself through those situations, but also training is key. And, what you did 5 years ago in officiating, you're probably better at now. And so I certainly made mistakes. I certainly said things to coaches I shouldn't have said that escalated the situation. So you learn from that and, you become a pretty good diffuser of situations. And then I go back to someone has to be the adult in the situation. And if it's not the referee, we're in trouble because coaches at times can act like children.
Yep. And that ain't limited to college coaches. That's for sure. We both have seen that happen other places. So you said it's easier to referee at higher levels of the game, but the pressure's different. Why do you say it's easier to referee at the higher levels?
Well, I think, as a fan, you can see how the game is cleaner the higher it goes up. So it's more predictable. Players, coaches, referees, off-ice staff all know what they're doing. And so it is a much more well-orchestrated event. And then the game itself is just a lot more predictable. So as long as you've done your training and you do what you're supposed to do, identifying what needs to be called, what doesn't need to be called, but also just positioning and things like that, the game kind of can take care of itself a little bit as those players have played a lot of hockey. Those coaches have coached a lot of hockey, and there's expectations, and we'll probably get into this, but there's a culture and a code to how the college game is played. There's a culture and a code how the pro game is played. And as long as you understand that, it usually goes pretty smoothly for a referee.
What would you say like the separator is as you move up levels of hockey and refereeing? Is it skating, knowledge of the game, or is it like what you alluded to, like staying in control?
Yeah, I think about instructing young referees. They ask that question a lot, so it's a good question. I would say that no different than players. When you get to a high level, everyone can skate. When you get to a high level, every referee can skate. Everyone knows the rules. So I do think it's those intangible soft skills. Communication is probably the biggest one I think of, is how do you sell yourself in a way that is real, is true to who you are, but is perceived confidence, but not arrogance. And also how you manage those big situations so that you come out looking like you were in charge without being perceived a jerk. Other words that, I don't know if this was a R-rated or PG-rated podcast. So I would say it's those soft skills, communication, managing the big moments, keeping yourself in control. And then what you do off the ice certainly matters too. There's some politics in this game, and that comes with officiating, playing, coaching. So managing some of that to get to the next level is important too.
This is a question totally off the top of my head, but do they also train you in how to restrain people physically? Because I would imagine that there are many athletes that you have had to restrain that are quite a bit bigger and stronger than you.
The great thing about hockey is your rule book has about 6 pages dedicated to fighting. And so at the upper levels, and so the higher you go, the more respectful the players are of that. So yes, there is training on how to break up fights, but I'm not huge compared to like NHL hockey players or pro hockey players. And so there is certainly a mutual respect that goes on when officials are present. Players will respect that. And if they don't, there are consequences. But proper technique is important for the safety of yourself, your teammate, and then the players. Like, you don't want them to get hurt in those situations either. So it is always one of the best topics at referee seminars, how to break a fight. People are very excited to learn that.
Well, have you ever been hit by a player?
No.
Not like take a swing at you.
No.
That's amazing for as much as you've refed and some of the places that you have refed.
Yeah. I think hockey culture is for as out of control as it can seem at times. There's a lot of respect for authority in hockey culture. Big picture.
So what have you learned as a referee at those high levels that you now use in your life?
Interestingly enough, I'm a behavior intervention teacher by trade now, and refereeing was probably the best training I've had for that job. Of course, child development classes and things like that were very important, but this idea of being calm under pressure. When a kid becomes escalated, how do I stay calm to help them, co-regulate, if you will? Speaking to parents who might not be happy with what's going on with their child in school is in some ways similar to speaking to an upset coach. And so those communication strategies, keeping yourself composed, staying true to who you are, and probably the general philosophy of what you think is right when it comes to discipline, is very similar to calling a hockey game. And as I reflect on my current job and my previous job as official, there are a lot of similarities. It's just a little bit easier because I'm not on a quarter-inch blade and being yelled at by, 10,000 people.
Yeah. This question just popped up too, is like, tell me about a game that like was so fun to referee. What are some of your favorite memories or best games that you've been a part of?
I don't want to say they all blur together because there are some that stand out, but when I retired, it was what I missed the most of the guys. With that being said, the highlight of my career probably was the World Juniors in 2006 in British Columbia, Vancouver, British Columbia. I worked the semifinal game and the gold medal game of that tournament, and it was at GM Place in Vancouver. I believe 19,000 people were in the building. Canada played Russia for the gold medal, and I think I called a penalty on Canada 15 seconds into the game. And Mr. Suter, the coach from Canada, wasn't real impressed with that decision, but I think he also respected it. So that would be the highlight moment as far as games go. Gophers, St. Cloud State was always a blast. Going down to Wisconsin when the Kohl Center was rocking, you think about a Gophers Wisconsin series.
Yeah.
Early 2000s.
Any Final Five finals that were fun?
I did not do a final in the Final Five. I worked the Final Five. That was just a great experience. I mean, that, as we went from WCHA to Big Ten, I think all hockey fans, including referees, really miss that experience as a hockey fan. And as a referee, it was just a great weekend because all the referees were together and hanging out downtown St. Paul. But I do remember being on TV when I was called in sick from work and having a video review that took about 3.5 minutes. And when you do a video replay, they kind of have the official on the screen. I'm like, this probably isn't going to be good for my career.
Yeah. So in that World Junior semi, what you said finals, what are some of the names of the player? Like, I'm sure there's guys from those teams that are in the NHL.
Yeah, that was Malkin. That was his year. And then Taves, Doughty. I'm not the greatest of names, but it was most of those players that are really close to retirement now.
Yeah.
We're 50, or I'm 50. And so those players were 18 at the time. So that's almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to make the players. There's a few of them still in the league, though.
Yeah. Well, Malkin's still around. That guy's around forever.
Yeah,
was exactly. Crosby in those games?
I believe he was the year before, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, I bet that was fun.
And for those that don't know, the World Juniors in Canada is very similar to the Super Bowl in America. It is what Canadians do over the holidays.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. I can't wait. It's here next year, right?
Yep, correct. Yep. I received more text messages from all the referees I worked with in minor league hockey for do that World Juniors than any college game. I mean, it was a huge deal in Canada.
Switching gears, let's talk a little bit about youth hockey, Armstrong Cooper, and some of our work together. So what on earth inspired you to take on all those leadership roles?
Sometimes being asked is the impetus, but coming from where I came from, a small town, having some really good people in my life that taught me that you need to leave the world a better place, basically, than when you found it. Just being grounded in how important community is. And then I think being a teacher, it was clear to me that we need people in youth sports that care about the game more than they care about just their child. And so it was an easy transition for me to give back to the game that gave so much to me. Mm-hmm. I've seen the world because of hockey. I just wanted to make sure that kids who decided to embark on this thing we call a hockey career journey, whatever you want, had a place to play that they were protected from some of the insanity that can happen in youth sports.
Well, yeah, like I said at that board meeting my last one, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing until I kind of got to the end.
Yeah.
So, all right. So one of the things we did early on, you came to my garage when we created the Love Your Game philosophy. For those who don't know, Armstrong has Love Your Game all over the rink now. And that was something that 4 or 5 of us worked on, and we actually implemented it into coaches' meetings and the philosophy. And what we said was WINGS stand for work hard, integrity, no excuses, gratitude, and success for all. And there's offshoots of all of that. But how would you say that impacted the community, and how has it resonated with players, coaches, and parents?
Great question. I think for me, looking back on it, I think the reason the work was identified as needed is we were constantly coming together in reactive modes, and we were reacting to things maybe parents or players or coaches were doing that didn't align with what our perceived belief system should be about youth sports. And I think eventually leaders, parents were giving us feedback on that. And so as a group, we decided that we needed to come up with some core values that bonded us together. And so I would say how it's impacted our organization and how that work changed our organization is that it grounded us in a set of beliefs that we can identify as important to all of us. And so when myself as a board member might not get something right, I'm held accountable to those same set of values as when our players mess up or when we do something right. We aren't just celebrating that I scored 3 goals in a game. We're celebrating that, we play this game because we love it and we love it for all. And I think it shaped our future in a way that allows us to build on it versus continuing to react to those negative events they're always going to happen in organizations. Like,
yep,
that's part of learning. But for me, it gave us a positive message, a set of beliefs that we can move forward with.
Well, and I feel like from my perspective, having a kid play through it and during it, I also think recently Armstrong Cooper has had a lot of success at varying levels. And I think that helped to facilitate some of that. And I know that definitely entered into our decision-making coaching too, right? Some people filtered their way out and some people filtered their way in. So you have heard me speak numerous times, either in public to coaches and Armstrong Cooper, but you've also helped me when I've had, listen to me, give me feedback when I've had big presentations. Tell me how what you've heard or what we've talked about and actually implemented through our conversations. Has any of that impacted the way you approach coaching and leadership?
Yes, sometimes proactively, and sometimes after a situation happens, I'm like, I don't think I lived up to Honda's standards there. So then I have to go back and get it right. But, your work isn't, it's pretty extensive in that it covers a pretty broad swath of how you develop an athlete, how you develop a good human. But for me, at the core of it is this. We have athletes that some have incredible physical abilities. Some are more developing athletic abilities. But at the end of the day, they also have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings that if we ignore that, we're not going to get what is their best. And so, as I think about a lot of your work and how we help athletes train their brains to handle pressure, train their brains to handle mistakes, because confidence doesn't come just because you were born with good athletic skills. Confidence comes with being able to handle mistakes and learn from them and provide the needed learning, not just physically, but, mentally and emotionally. And so as a coach, when I get it wrong, it's very clear to me that I missed my opportunity to help them grow. It might have felt good to me, but it wasn't what the athlete probably needed. So your words, your lessons keep me grounded and making sure that I remember this big idea of building capacity, not only physically, but mentally.
Well, and the other question that brings up for me is, like, would you say that you have seen a change in the world about the openness to talk about mental fitness, mental health, mental performance?
I think it's certainly, we've moved the needle on that. I think we have, you and our organization was a very strong voice for this. And, nationally, there's certainly been a lot of really strong leaders that have spoke about the importance of this work. And I think USA Hockey has done a good job of at least providing a pathway, if you will, to make sure that we're talking about this. And so we certainly have seen growth in that area. But like everything else, when the pressure's on, when it's what seems to be a life or death situation with a game or their child's placement on a team or whatever, it's certainly obvious that we have to continue on this journey.
Because there are numerous examples of our work together where it was clear that there was more going on with an athlete or a situation where that needed to be addressed. But I also think that some of those situations, like, what was great is that in some of those situations, the parents were very aware of that, or aware enough to know that they needed to do a little bit more.
I think that speaks of the work. Yeah. I mean, it's not something we have to hide behind anymore.
This is a both topic question. What advice would you give to coaches, parents, players about how to interact with referees during games?
Yeah. So, I think here again, the level really doesn't matter here, because I think gamesmanship, the higher you go, is part of the game. And so I think my advice to youth coaches is don't act like college coaches or pro coaches, because those referees get paid to be part of that gamesmanship. With that being said, though, I think this advice rings true for myself as a coach. And I remember talking to our coaches in our organization. What purpose are you speaking to the referee for right now? Like, what do you want to gain out of this interaction? And because if you're not asking yourself that question, what you can be doing is distracting yourself, distracting your players, and frankly, distracting the referees and the parents in the stands, because they are watching. You're the one leading their kids. And so I just always stress to our coaches that have had interactions with referees that aren't so positive, like, what was your purpose in saying that to them? And did you accomplish that purpose? So did that bench minor get you what you wanted out of that situation? And if the answer is yes, then you got what you wanted. But at the youth level, to me, what coaches and referees should be trying to do is partner in raising better kids, like teaching them the importance of respect for authority, if you will, and that conflict can be handled in ways that isn't belittling or disrespectful. It can be handled in a way that we come out of it learning something.
Would you say that referees are likely to remember and approach coaches based on a series of experiences over time?
Yes, referees are like elephants. They remember everything, especially, if we think about our U15s or our Bantams, you're seeing a lot of the same officials kind of over and over again. But, even at the younger levels, some of those referees have a lot of experience. But I think there's a danger in your persona as a coach being one of those that yells at officials, because at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to pay dividends for your team or, your organization. You might get a couple of short-term wins out of it. You might influence a call or two, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to pay off.
So in a way, what you're saying is it's a relational thing. Like if I've been respectful, know your name, built a relationship as much as you can over time, that if I've been mostly respectful, if I ask you to come over to explain a call, you're much more willing to do that.
From my perspective, we have to remember referees are all over the map on this skill
Oh,
as well.
yeah, that's I.
Just like coaches. So, but from a coaching perspective, we can't really control that. We can only control how we handle the situation. 100%. If it's a professional relationship, I will give the benefit of the doubt to the coach who's been respectful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the players, frankly.
Yeah. And if the player has been a chronic, like, I don't like this word, but I think it describes like a chronic whiner.
Yep.
You're less likely to want to have that conversation. And I mean, yeah, I guess what we're both saying is it really comes down to how do you treat people.
Our most competitive kids often have a really high sense of fairness, and they believe that everyone should approach things at their level of passion. And so when they get upset about a call, I don't think they even understand how they're being perceived by the rest of the fans, referees, stuff like that. They're so trapped in that moment. And so we go back to that inner athlete. How do you build that skill in that player to care that much, but respond to the situation differently, where they're actually coming out of it in a better place than a worse place? Our best player on our team the other night got a 10-minute misconduct. 7 minutes left in the game. We're 1 goal down. He's the only kid that scored in the game. After the game, I said to him, so was that worth it? Was it worth telling that referee that was a soft call? Did you get what you wanted? And of course the answer was no. But our goal is to get him to respond, not with less passion, because we want him to play the game with passion, but with more intentionality, that he doesn't make that mistake again, because it hurt everyone.
So let me ask you this. What's it like both having the expertise as a referee and being a coach and or being a parent in the stands? I would imagine there are many times where you've had to bite your
Oh,
tongue.
it's maddening. Those referees make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm also an administrator too, so I need to be mindful of that. I represent an organization. If I'm acting like that, it pretty much gives free will for our parents to do that and gives us a bad name. And so I certainly haven't always lived up to what I would say my ideal self is, but I do strongly believe that officials are a part of the game and it needs to be respected. And I want our players, our parents, and our administrators to understand that. And so whether I think the referee's in the right position because I know he's not, doesn't really matter.
Well, and I would imagine the thing that often drives me crazy is when referees and parents or coaches can't sense that the game is getting out of control and that they have a role in that. I mean, like I shared with you last fall, my son plays in a game on the East Coast, and I've never seen a referee ever in my life, by trying to get control of the game in a very authoritative power and control way, actually make the game get out of control.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the kids and how people respond to it also plays a role. Like a game getting out of control is not all about the referees, but that, to me, that feels like that's the guiding force.
Well, back to our previous conversation, that referee would be a good client of yours because he wasn't or she wasn't managing her emotions in a way that de-escalated the situation. Their emotions were escalating the situation. And the players and coaches and fans feed off of that emotion. Then you have not a good situation.
Have you ever changed a call because parents yelled at you or the refs or?
No, I've changed a couple of calls because I think I got it wrong. I mean, but that doesn't happen like in hockey. It's not like picking up the flag and football, but yeah, you don't change your call. I mean, when I was a young referee, I'm sure I was influenced by that pressure more than I am today.
Yeah. So what do you see as the biggest challenges for hockey coaches today, especially in the professionalization of youth sports era?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the biggest challenge is how do they keep teaching the game at a developmentally appropriate level, while some parents expect the game to be taught like they're professional athletes. And I think that's a very difficult expectation to manage, because they still are kids. We want to have high expectations for them. We want them to learn the game, but we also have to identify that this still isn't a business. I mean, it's not, and when I say business, it's not a business like the National Hockey League. We don't have GMs that their job is to hire and fire people that they believe are going to put them in the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, we're developing all our players, and there are players. They're not going anywhere. There are coaches. At the time, they're not going anywhere unless they obviously mess up a lot. But so I think managing that you hit it, like this professionalization of youth sports is a very real thing. And we want our coaches to get better, using educational tools and stuff like that. I think we're doing that, but certain parents probably don't have the right. It's harder for them to keep that in mind when we think about youth sports and choices. Like Minnesota still is grounded in community-based hockey, but choices are out there, and how do you manage that piece of it as well? Like, do you keep your kid in community-based hockey? Do you leave community-based hockey? And there's not a right or wrong answer there, but you have to stay true to who you are as a coach, your organization's values, and that of I suppose your parents and things like that too.
Mm-hmm. So, given all these different roles you've been in, coach, administrator, referee, player, parent, if you could share one message with the people who listen to these podcasts about respecting the game, building a love for the game while maintaining high standards, what would you say?
I think for me, love is a very strong emotion, and I truly love hockey more than I should, and probably in unhealthy ways at times. And because of that, sacrifices have happened in my life. But with all that being said, I never made the National Hockey League as a referee, but not necessarily even because of my skill, because the game is much bigger than me. The game is much bigger than you. The game is much bigger than anyone listening to this podcast. So my advice is this: hockey is way bigger than any one individual. Ovechkin might beat Wayne Gretzky's scoring record. Like, never thought that would happen. Wayne Gretzky, for us, is the ultimate hockey player in the world, right? Growing up watching him. And so individuals make the sport better if we choose to do that. And individuals can also take away from the game. And so my advice, and I try to live by this every single day, it is my responsibility to make the game better for the next generation of hockey players so they can give back. And that's to me the culture that I want to see at Armstrong Cooper, at District 3, and Minnesota Hockey. So we continue to make sure the game stays bigger than any one person.
So what values and principles do you prioritize when you're coaching?
For me, you can't replace hard work. And so players might not have the most skill in the world. Not every player has been gifted athletic ability like others, but hard work to me is what, when we think about effort, attitude, hard work, those intangibles are what sports is supposed to teach us. And what we want sport to teach is that. So when they go out and get a job, they understand that those three things in particular, effort, attitude, and hard work, are what's going to get them the job, keep the job, and get them to grow in the job. And as we all end up in a beer league or a Thursday night hockey league somewhere like that, that's whether you're the best hockey player in the world or you're on your association C team. It doesn't really matter. If you love the game, you'll be playing on a Thursday night somewhere. And so my priority is that our kids work hard and they respect not only themselves, their teammates, their coaches, but the game. And, players will sort themselves out. Players will individually do the things they need to do or not do to get to their eventual ending point. But we want them to stay grounded in some core values and be true to themselves and their organization teammates.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today on the Inner Athlete podcast. It's been fun I learned a lot about you. I think we had talked about that we played football against each other.
The Raiders were undefeated that year, actually. So I would imagine we did talk about it.
Yeah, you know what?
We weren't.
They weren't?
No, I didn't.
I know. I remember we won a lot of games, but I don't remember playing you. Oh, wait, I do. I think I lit you up really bad. I might have even concussed you. Nope. I was way too slow and not heavy enough to hit you. I was not. I love playing youth football. I played a lot, but I was never big. Still am not. So it took a lot of work to not get pushed around. Yeah. So great to have you on. Fun to hear your experiences and that's part of the reason I wanted you on this is because you have so many different perspectives. And the other thing is, I really think for the listeners, it's important for the listeners to realize that, you're a high level referee and your view into that. I always say in my mental fitness Fridays, the best way to get better refereeing is to shut up. Right. Because the number of times and the number of levels of games that I've been at and important games that never really helps to yell at referees. So, and that's part of the reason why we have a shortage of them. And I also think that's probably why sometimes the quality suffers. So I think it's great to have you on here because you have so many different perspectives and you're well spoken from a referee to a behavior interventionist to an administrator, a coach, a parent, and the things I will tell you, looking back on our time together, I have nothing but deep respect for you and the work that you've done and the things that you've taken on a lot of tough situations. We've done that together, but being a youth leader is hard.
It's good work, but it's hard work.
Yeah. It's satisfying because you have an impact, but you have always held yourself with integrity in class. And if you haven't, you've owned up to it and changed the direction. So that's great.
It was a pleasure.